buddy. We're Cash One Pond. We're ready. We got your back, and we're unbeating all the rest of them. Here we go. You ready? Well, you want money? We got money. You need money? We got money. We're Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Money to lend, money to spend. We can put money in your hands. We're Cash One Pond. We're Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. You don't have to worry. Sometimes when you're a little broke and you just need something to get over the hill, we're there with the truck. We got your back. We're Cash One Pond. Come down and see us. Cash One Pond. We're Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond. Cash One Pond.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome in, everybody. Colter Nuanez, Brooks Nuanez, SKYLINESportsMT.com. Happy anniversary to us. This is cool. It's our 10th anniversary. We've certainly been doing this for, 10 years, so it's been quite a journey. It's been very fun. It's been awesome to do it with Brooks, my brother. We also have to say so much thank you to Andrew Houghton. He's been our right-hand man for the vast majority of the last decade. Blake Hempstead has also been an essential part of Skyline Sports. Jason Bocci has also been a great contributor for us as well. It's been very gratifying to be a part of all of this. Building an independent media company when people said we couldn't do it, and look at, here we are, Mom. We made it. So hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Hi, everybody. And happy anniversary to us. Here's what we're doing. We are going top 10 lists because that's fun. So we're going to give you quick hitting podcasts and videos about all the best players, the best teams, the best moments, the best games that we've seen. So make sure to keep it tuned to SkylineSportsMT.com all summer long. And we're going to start this thing off. Basically, we're going to be women's basketball heavy here in June. Then in July, we'll do our men's basketball countdowns. And then in August, we'll do our football countdowns to lead us right into football. Please also make sure to follow us on all the social media. And if you have arguments about our opinions and our lists, please let us know. Let us know what you think. You know, if you have a team that maybe thinks ranks ahead of our teams or a player or whatever it might be, we'll also have a whole bunch of great photo elements, video elements, and everything in between for you. So keep it tuned, SkylineSportsMT.com. Today, our top 10 women's basketball teams of all time. It's funny. First of all, Brooks, hello. Thanks for being here. Fun.
Hello.
Happy 10th anniversary to us.
Happy 10th anniversary.
So it's funny because Andrew Houghton compiled this, and when he first compiled this Google Doc and sent it over, I was like, man, great start. But I got a lot of stuff I want to dispute on here. And then I started really going into it and looking through it and looking through the way that he ranked the teams. I think we're going to have some pretty heated debates when it comes to the players. But I do think that this team list, I think it sort of goes in tiers. I think you have like 3 tiers, and I think you could probably debate the teams within each of those respective tiers. But I think it's like pretty cut and dry, especially once you get to the top half of the list and especially the top 4 teams on the list. So, let's get into it. First of all, I mean, you and I both, we've loved covering women's basketball in the Big Sky Conference. I think it's awesome that it's taken center stage in the sort of American sporting conscience lately, but there's been a lot of great Big Sky basketball in the last 10 years.
It's my favorite thing, and anyone who has heard me talk about it, it's a superior product to darn near all other college athletics at this level. I mean, football obviously has a high level of athlete, a high level of competition. We talk about men's basketball, and you talk about other sports on the exterior, whether that's volleyball, even some track and field at times. I still think that women's basketball is played at as high of a level as anywhere in the nation here in the Big Sky Conference, which we focus on.
So we're going to start this. We'll have an actual print rankings where we go number 10 through number 1 that are sort of definitive in our opinions. But we're going to do this on this podcast and this video in tiers. So we'll start with what I believe is the entry tier. This is the teams that I think should be ranked 10th, 9th, and 8th. What I want to discuss a little bit, though, are how we're going to rank these teams. So this entry tier includes the 2015-2016 Idaho team, which this was before the full rise of the Splash Sisters, Michaela Ferenz and Taylor Pierce, but certainly was sort of the entry point to that narrative. They beat Montana State that year. Montana State team was very good as well, but that was sort of the beginning. that team had a little bit of a anticlimactic ending because then when those two girls, Taylor Pierce and Michaela Ferenz, were seniors, they had, and this has happened several times at the neutral site tournament, they had a terrible shooting game against Portland State, against that Portland State zone, and they lost in heartbreaking fashion. That same thing happened to Montana State several years later. That's how Darian White's career ended as well. So several of the best players in the league actually didn't go out on top with championships. The other teams in this tier include the 18-19 Portland State team, which was the team that ousted that Idaho squad and went on to go to the NCAA tournament. That team was led by Ashley Bolston and Courtney West, who was the 6'5" center, who was the center of that 2-3 zone that Lynn Kennedy and his team loved to employ. And they also featured Desiree Hansen, who's certainly one of the most unforgettable players in the Big Sky Conference. She was like a redheaded small town girl from Oregon who had like street ball skills, and she hits the game winner in the Big Sky Championship to send Portland State into the championship. And then the third team in this sort of entry tier of the top 10 is the Sac State team from 2 years ago. They were led by Kalasia Dean, who was sort of a one and done, but a Big Sky Conference MVP. They also featured Isabel Natabo, who was a double-double machine. And they have a unique place in Big Sky history, and we'll talk about that in just a minute as well, because they didn't really have like this adversity and struggle leading up to their championship, nor did they have any sort of pressure to repeat. It was just sort of like a one and done. Dean was there for a year. Natabo was only there for 2. Mark Campbell, the head coach, was only there for 2. They won it, and basically everything dissolved, and they kind of went back to square one as a program. But you can't overstate how good that team was. They went through a great league that year. They were the champions ahead of teams like Montana State and NAU, who were both very good that year. So certainly that Sac State team is one to remember, particularly because they're so unique. So I guess let's start with this, Brooks. Of those 3 teams, like who's the most memorable and who's the best?
Well, I mean, I remember the Idaho team so well because it was in Reno still, the neutral site tournament, which was...
And that's why we used to call John Newley the King of Reno.
The King of Reno. So that team was good. They also had... That team had a lot of depth. Knowing what Michaela Ferenz and Taylor Pierce would become as players helps you have some more perspective on them as freshmen on that team with some really talented players as veteran leaders. So I think that team out of this first tier is the most talented team as far as just top to bottom, the way that they played, really fundamentally sound, had a really good plan. I really have always respected what John Newley likes to do on offense. He likes to get the game in flow. He'll run sets, he'll run plays, but it really is a player-run kind of offense, and that kind of transitions back into, sure, on defense, we're going to get after it, but also we're okay with giving up a bucket or two, knowing that we're going to have a high-powered offense. So a fun team to watch, quite memorable. I think Portland State is obviously the dark horse here.
Yes.
With just a low-key good team.
They were a great team.
Ashley Bolston is one of the most dominant players that we've covered, and you wouldn't think that by her pace. We always said, man, she is slow and methodical and kind of really works it. But
never sweated in a game, I don't think.
She is. I'm about 6'2", and she's taller than me. And she played point guard and was at the top of a 2-3 zone. So you're talking about a 6'2", 6'3 gal with long reach and really just a nice command of the game. So she's definitely the sleeper here.
She also had that thing where she never for 1 second looked like she was going hard. So then you were like, well, is she slow? Is she lazy? But she's averaging almost 3 steals a game at the top of that zone. She's never turning the ball over. So then you just realize it's just because she's so talented.
Yeah, and she would get to like 12 feet, kind of like the 12-foot elbow and drop bank shots and stuff where you're just like, what's this game that she's got?
Totally.
So nasty player. And again, this is more team-oriented here. So Sac State, I agree. We kind of have notes that say one of the highest ceilings on this list. If that team is functioning at a high level and everyone's playing, I mean, Isabel Natabo is a different kind of player.
She's the most physically intimidating player that the league's seen in our 10 years doing Skyline sports.
I think it would be hard to argue in a long time, in this century. I mean, she transferred to Iowa State?
I think she went with Mark Campbell to TCU.
TCU.
She was from a junior college in Iowa. Maybe that's where you get the Iowa.
Sure. Her body, her makeup, insane, man. And she could play at such a high level, such an emotional player as well. Very invested.
You're right. Iowa State. I'm incorrect.
I watched her last year, and she was she played and looked the exact same in the Big 12 as she did in the Big Sky. So you could tell that talent translate. And Kalasia Dean is just a hooper. I mean, we're talking about someone that can really score, really high-level player. That team was shooting around it, some big wings. I mean, there were some wings on that team. You're talking about 6'2", 6'3", some gals that could hit threes. Again, a high floor. But out of this little first group, I think Idaho, for whatever reason in my heart and through the history of Skyline, was the most memorable team.
You have to give that Idaho team credit for a few different reasons, too, because we mentioned the Splash Sisters. They're the ones that became the biggest stars. But that team also featured players like Carly Wilson, who's the consummate point guard. John Newley would talk effusively about Carly Wilson all the time. Allie Ford was the leader of the pack. I mean, she was a very poised and sort of centered center, for lack of a better way of saying it.
She's going to be on my list of sleepers, of people that might not remember a player like her.
She was very good. That Idaho team, though, also had two other factors that went into this. First of all, I misspoke. They didn't beat Montana State. Montana State got beat before they got to the championship because
Idaho State hit the half quarter.
Juliette Jones, I'll never forget her name because it was one of the most unbelievable moments in Skyline sports history. She hits a three-quarter court shot at the buzzer to beat Montana State. They
beat
were
the one seed.
I mean, they were the best team in the league. They had Jasmine Hamas and Lindsey Stockton. They were unbelievable. They would be on this top 10 team, no doubt about it, except for that they got beat in the first game of the tournament. That was, though, before anybody was used to the neutral site. Like, in the back of Montana State's minds, they were still thinking, we deserve to have this tournament in Bozeman. But you don't deserve anything when the rules have changed and when the sort of logistics have changed. It was just a really weird situation, and that was a heartbreaking deal. And I'll never forget, I mean, if you were talking press conferences, top 10 press conferences of all time in Skyline sports history, Jasmine Hamas sitting up there by herself and talking about the heartbreak of that loss was as much respect as I've had for an athlete. It was unbelievable that she was able to do it because she was shattered. I mean, the other girls couldn't even come because they were so heartbroken. But that Idaho team did. They have a little bit of a good fortune, too, because they missed Montana State. Idaho and Montana State have always been great matchups for each other. They've played a lot in this tournament over the years. So maybe Idaho still gets through them. The other factor you got to mention about that Vandals team, though, they were coming out of the WAC. They just joined the Big Sky 2 years ago.
Totally.
They knew how to play on neutral site tournaments.
Absolutely.
They had already won the WAC tournament, I think, twice in the last 3 years. Carly Wilson and Allie Ford had played on those teams.
They seemed so good.
Christina Salvatore, how could we forget?
First team all-league.
I mean,
led
she
the league in
was awesome.
scoring.
And then she went on to become an assistant at Idaho, so we can't forget her. At Sac State, I think we both sort of agree, sort of unique in this list. Portland State, I think, would give every single team on this list a lot of trouble because, like you mentioned, they have a 6'2" gal at the top of the zone, and then they have a 6'5" gal in the middle. You have to also mention Sydney Riley, who was a great scorer on the wing. So, for ranking these, I actually think Idaho's the best of these three teams.
I do too.
Then I'm going to go with Portland State, and then I'm going to go with Sac State.
I 100% agree.
All right, next tier, SkylineSportsMT.com, our 10th anniversary. The next tier includes, I think, three more teams. And those three teams are the 2014-2015 Montana Lady Grizz. That was the last great Robin Selvig team. That was the last team that won the Big Sky Conference tournament on its home court. And that was also the last team that got to host the tournament because of winning the league. And that was also the last Lady Grizz team to go to the NCAA tournament. Crazy that it's been a full 10 years since there's been a Lady Grizz team in the NCAA tournament. The other two teams in this tier, I believe, are the 2018-2019 Idaho team, the Splash Sisters, that went back to the NCAA tournament. This is the year before they got knocked out by Portland State. And then I think that you got last year's Eastern Washington team. Pretty hard to deny 29 victories. I thought Eastern got completely screwed when it came to the seeding this last year. I mean, given the fact that they went 16-2 in league play and that they ran through the league. I mean, they had two different 10-game winning streaks during the regular season. And the fact that they won 29 games, broke their school record by a full 8 victories, had multiple all-league players led by Jamie Loetta, who was the Big Sky Conference MVP. I actually think this team was underrated by the NCAA tournament committee this year, and maybe a sneaky team within the ratings here as well.
Tough team.
Let's start with those Lady Grizz, though. What do you remember about that team? That was Kelly Cole, was the Big Sky MVP. Kaylee Valley, when she was still on the rise, she hadn't gotten hurt yet, but she was a prolific scorer. Maggie Rickman, Carly Selvig. That was a very good team. And the way that they won that Big Sky Championship game, that's another thing. You talk about teams that are left off this list. That DeShera Strange, Stephanie Lee, Northern Colorado team that they beat in the championship.
Buddy.
That team is in the top 10, maybe in the top 5 if they win that game, but they don't. They blow a 19-point lead in Missoula, and that Lady Grizz team goes back to the NCAA tournament. It's pretty crazy that it's been 10 years, though, since Lady Grizz have been in the tournament.
Yeah, that was the first women's championship we covered at Skyline, and I remember it well. I mean, Kelly Cole was obviously an engine, and she could make things go. She could get downhill on people like no one else, really. And to have a kind of a ball-dominant guard like that can get to the rack and also facilitate. I thought, Carly Selvig played a big role in that team defensively.
I mean, she was the Big Sky Defensive Player of the Year that year.
Yeah, and she was just a tremendous rebounder. She really built her game into being such a team player, obviously from that lineage, from that program, from that family, but also that's just not like something that can happen overnight. She definitely sacrificed and became such a tremendous defensive player. And then you had role players. I think we're calling them kind of like super role players, right? People like Maggie Rickman that can add so much to a team.
I mean, Macaulay Feller was a sort of a
Macaulay
quote-unquote
Feller
role
was a
player,
good player.
and she's like a 13-point per game scorer as like the third option on that
Totally.
team.
It really is a kind of a nostalgic throwback classic Lady Grizz team where there was plenty of horsepower, but it was more about depth and playing as a team and rising to the occasion as much as it wasn't quite true, natural, busting the doors off at star power. So it didn't necessarily have what we've mentioned about some of these teams that are driven by one specific star, but definitely a well-rounded team that in any tournament setting, especially if you're at home, it's going to be a really hard team to beat.
And the home court definitely paid off because that Lady Grizz team had a ton of talent, but they also got by the skin of their teeth in that tournament
Several times,
and
every game.
But that was the formula for Robin Selvig was win the league by the skin of your teeth. And certainly there was some dominant Lady Grizz teams, no doubt, mostly in the 90s and early 2000s. This was his last great team. This team wasn't really actually dominant. They just knew how to win.
They weren't, right. Yeah.
I mean, they beat Idaho State by 2 points in the first round. They beat Eastern Washington 55-51 in the semis, and then they beat Northern Colorado by 11 in the championship, but they were down by a whole bunch, double digits, and they came all the way back and won that one. Any thoughts on that Idaho team with the Splash Sisters or the most recent Big Sky champs, Eastern Washington?
I do. I mean, you definitely can't forget the Idaho team with Beyonce B, who...
As a freshman,
who
that was the other part of Newley's formula is he would always have a freshman ready to go, and we saw it 3 different times. Michaela Ferenz was the Big Sky MVP, the tournament MVP that is, as a freshman. Beyonce B was a breakout player, got Idaho all the way to the championship game that year, and then Sydney Gandy also had a great tournament. She ended up then fizzling sort of after that, and then ended up transferring to Loyola Marymount, but that was also part of the Newley formula.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really hard to say that team wasn't one of the better teams we've covered. I mean, you had star power and depth, and I think that team in the right setting, if they have momentum, is going to be a team that is really, really hard to beat. One of the more memorable teams, again, because I think Idaho has an impression of being memorable. I think that the style that they play obviously lends its hand to being quite entertaining. But also, I just think if you add in the Clinker sisters, who
for sure
are both Montana products, who didn't go to play for the Lady Grizz, and you add in Gina Markson, who I believe was on that team. I think she was a freshman along.
Yep, that's right.
Ends up coming back to play at Montana later in her career. A talented person like Gina Markson, who's your 5th option, who's going to be a 13-point, 14, 15-point game scorer a game. And you add in the Clinkers, I mean, you're talking about a team that has rebounding, toughness, defense, and then some of the best shooting that you've ever seen in the history of college basketball.
Well, the other thing is there was such a heartbreaking ending to that whole saga, but then they went on and won 2 games in the WNIT.
Yeah, totally.
Like the year before, they went to the NCAA tournament, got beat out, and then they went to the WNIT and won 2 games. So certainly it's rare for Big Sky teams to get victories.
Join Town Pump's Pump It Up Rewards Plus program and never pay full price for fuel again.
Save 5 cents on every gallon every day at any Town Pump across Montana.
Plus, earn and redeem points on your favorite in-store items to get free stuff with our clubs.
Stop in and pick up a rewards card. Download the Pump It Up Rewards Plus app today.
Or visit townpump.com/rewards to register and start saving.
Town Pump. Right down the road. Pump it up. Oh, yeah.
Big Sky Breakdown, SkylineSportsMT.com. Brooks Nuanez, Colter Nuanez. All right, here's their top 4 then.
Hey, we got to just real quick on that last Eastern Washington team. I just want to mention, as well-rounded of a team and as level-headed of a team as we've covered, I thought Jody Gleason did a masterclass of coaching that team.
I agree.
They were awful her first year.
Yes.
They were not a good team. She coached some wins and they had some talent and stuff, but they weren't a good team.
Nope.
And she turned it into one of the better teams we've covered. And so much of it, when I'm sitting there on the sidelines, on the baseline, photographing all these games, I can hear everything that coaches are saying. And I have different rankings of how coaches coach and what they say and how they rally players. Jody Gleason, there was really no one like what she did last year.
All right, let's talk about the top 4 teams then. And I think there might be a little bit of a debate between who's 3 and who's 4, but I think our top 2 are sort of written in stone. So here's our top tier, our top 4 teams of the last 10 years Skyline Sports history. We got the 2016-2017 Montana State squad that went to the NCAA tournament. That was a great story of redemption after they had lost the previous season in heartbreaking fashion on that half-court buzzer beater. That squad had lost Lindsey Stockton and Alexa Dawkins and Jasmine Hamas, but they still had Peyton Ferris and Riley Nordgaard. They kind of turned the keys over to them. They also had young players like Hannah Cottle and Delaney Junkermeyer who really came on. They went to the NCAA tournament. They competed with Washington. I mean, a tough task because at that moment, Kelsey Plum was Caitlin Clark before Caitlin Clark.
Absolutely.
And you're playing on Washington's home court. But they still were able to hang a little bit. Peyton Ferris had an iconic performance in that tournament game. So they have to be in the top 4. The 2020-2021 Idaho State squad has to be the most well-rounded team. They had the distinct advantages of having perhaps the best international flavor of any team over the last 10 years in the Big Sky with players from abroad like Estefania Ors, who's from Spain, Dora Golas, who's from Croatia, Diabo Kanate, who's from overseas. And then they actually managed the pandemic better than anybody. They were able to sustain during, and then in this season, 2020, 2021, the year after, where there was actually, sort of the year after, it was still a lingering factor, but the first time you have people in the stands, etc., then they were able to really go out and dominate, like really let it rip. And they also were very competitive in the NCAA tournament against Kentucky, which was a tough draw. Ryan Howard is on the national team this year in the Olympics, so if you watch her, that's who they were faced against. That Kentucky squad was led by her. And then our top 2 teams, one is, I think, indisputable as the number 1 team over the last 10 years in Skyline Sports annals, and then the other one is the biggest what-if team, but we're giving them the benefit of the doubt. Our number 2 definitive team is Montana State squad 2019 and 2020. That team featured 6 seniors, plus Darian White. So that's a pretty good start.
Oh, buddy.
I mean, when you're talking about Oleana Squires and just on down the line, all the great players that they had on that team. Fallon Frigi was the Big Sky MVP that year. They won 19 out of 20 Big Sky Conference games. That's the most in the history of the league. They also had great players like Blair Braxton, Madeline Smith, Tori Martell, Martha Cooterer, Colo Badbear, Madison Jackson. I mean, you're talking about every single one of those players except Madison Jackson got on the all-league team at some point in their career. Madison Jackson was a very good Big Sky player. So that's the most stacked team we've seen. Unfortunately, they went 19-1 in league play and then didn't get to go to the NCAA tournament because the whole thing got called off. They had a spot in the championship game, but there was rumors around Boise before that thing got called off that they were going to get a 10 seed, maybe an 11 seed. That team could go make some noise with 6 seniors in the NCAA tournament.
Absolutely.
And then our definitive number 1 squad in Skyline Sports history is Northern Colorado, 2017 and 2018. This was Cammie Etheridge's best team. This is the best team in Northern Colorado history. And in our opinion, this is the best team over the last 10 years in the Big Sky. Their primary figures, of course, were Savannah Smith and Savannah Scott and Kiana Williams. This vaulted Cammie Etheridge's career. She then went on to go to Washington State. If you've been paying attention to the Pac-12, they were the Pac-12 tournament champions. They've been a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament 2 years in a row. Etheridge, I think, is one of the best. She's probably the best coach we've covered in the post-Selvig era. Trisha Binford and Seton Sobolewski.
Trisha's right there, yeah.
Yeah, Trisha Binford, Seton Sobolewski, and John Newley are all in the mix, but I think Cammie Etheridge
she's another level.
I mean, she's a top-level coach. That's why she's at a top-level school. She's at a top 20 program right now getting paid millions of dollars, and she should be. So I guess just this whole group, every single one of those 4 teams, very, very good. But where do we sort of start? Where do we sort of finish with this group?
I mean, I do think I like that order. I think that initial 2016-17 Montana State team had a ton of talent, but it was that crazy mix of 2 seniors and a bunch of freshmen, right? It was Peyton Ferris and Riley Norgard and having this tremendous leadership, and then also having a big splash with all these freshmen, Oleana Squires and Madeline Smith and Blair Braxton, and players that went on to be some of the better players in Montana State history were also very good freshmen as well. And that's very common in women's basketball. For whatever reason, the maturity level of young women, they really have a chance to play early, and this team had that. So I do think that Peyton Ferris is an absolute problem. I don't think that any team on this entire list wants to see Peyton Ferris in a closeout game. Absolutely a problem. The 2020-21 Idaho State team, this is like Seton Sobolewski to the T. Like, this team is just...
But with the ability to score a little bit more,
They could score, but they were just smothering you, and they literally dictated the pace and the emotion of every single game they played. It was a really, really talented team. And I don't think that you could say that this team wouldn't have a shot against darn near anybody on this list. Just talent-wise, you're literally going to just fill the roster up full of really good players. The top 2 teams, I think, are much different, Colter. I agree with these are the top 2. The Montana State team in 19 and 20 is bar none the best team that we've covered. It's not close, roster-wise.
Yes.
Talent-wise.
Yes.
The Northern Colorado
Especially because
team,
towards the end of the year, Darian White had come on to be, I think, one of the best players in the league, even though she was only expected to be like the 5th best player on her team.
Absolutely. The depth, the ability to play multiple styles, shooting, playing together as a family, all this kind of stuff that made Montana State women's basketball kind of put their mark on what they are in the Big Sky Conference. The issue that they're going to run into, if we're talking about just a straight tournament or we're talking about just a head-to-head matchup, is what we already mentioned with Cammie Etheridge and Savannah Smith, who is arguably the greatest player that we've covered during the Skyline era. Some people might not remember Savannah Smith just because of the nature of Northern Colorado and kind of the ambiguity, like the randomness of where they fit into the league. Are they a doormat in football? Are they great in basketball one year and terrible in men's basketball the next year? They've been consistent in women's basketball, but there really is no one like Savannah Smith as far as her ability to dominate a game. This is just that conversation of a different level. Just like Cammie Etheridge, Savannah Smith didn't really fit into the Big Sky. We have a lot of good Big Sky players on these lists.
Yes.
We're talking about the Splash Sisters, Michaela Friends and Taylor. They are Big Sky players. They have an elite talent. They have one of the greatest talents in college basketball history. There's no one that's as well-rounded of a player as Savannah Smith. She is going to be a problem for everybody when it comes to the defensive end and then controlling the pace. The way that they built that team out and the way that they had the role players playing, just a dominant team.
The 3 things that I think make this Northern Colorado team the number 1 team are Cammie Etheridge and her prestige as a coach and the fact that she did it there and has continued to do it at a higher level. The fact that they got an 11 seed, that's the highest a Big Sky Conference team has been seeded since 1997.
It's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And their non-conference schedule. Not only do they go 16-2 in league play, but their non-conference included wins at DePaul, at LSU, and at BYU. Nobody has had caliber of non-conference wins.
Yep.
So I think that gives them the slight edge over 2019-2020 Montana State. Then I think that Idaho State, that 2020-21 team, is alone in 3rd. And then I think the Bobcats, led by Peyton Ferris, Riley Norgard, comes in at 4th.
Good teams, man. Those 2 Montana State teams are tough. No one's going to want to face those teams.
SkylineSportsMT.com, our 10th anniversary. That's our top 10 women's basketball teams of the last 10 years. We'll have our top 10 women's basketball players upcoming. Big shout to our boys up at Up Top Clothing. Up Top, reminding you to enjoy the moment. Anything from Grizz gear, Bobcat gear, Frontier Conference stuff. They have their Made in Montana collection. And you can also even get custom stuff if you need as well. Coming up, we're still sort of ironing out the details, but upcoming, we will have some promo codes for you as well to get you some discounts there at teamuptop.com. It's an awesome deal. Brooks and I are brothers. We've been in business together for 10 years. That's why we're celebrating this. These guys have been around for more than a decade. It's been a great pleasure to get to know them and also work with them. I've known Colt Anderson since I was in college, and it's been great to get to know his brothers, specifically Luke, who's the mastermind behind Up Top, and it's been awesome to see these guys grow the brand like they have. Up Top Clothing, reminding you to enjoy the moment. Visit teamuptop.com. This conversation will spill over into our top 10 women's basketball players, so that's coming up next week. So in the meantime, keep it tuned. SkylineSportsMT.com. Thanks for being here, Brooks.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Team Up Top has been providing some of the coolest Montana-made gear and lifestyle clothing for more than a decade, and now the legendary brand is excited to partner with Skyline Sports to celebrate our 10th anniversary with a variety of top 10 lists, counting down some of the best athletes of the last decade throughout the Big Sky Conference. Up Top Clothing was started by a pair of Montana brothers who have a great passion for the Treasure State and all the people who make it so great. Whether you're in the market for Grizz, Bobcat, or Frontier Conference gear, whether you want a t-shirt or a cap hat or any other high-quality lifestyle clothing, be sure to visit teamuptop.com. If you shop online, use the checkout code SKYLINE15 to get 15% off all online orders. Teamuptop.com. Up Top Clothing, reminding you to take a step back and enjoy the moment.